You remember the moment, not the first time you were hurt, not even the worst time. You remember the moment you stopped arguing back. Someone said something that cut deeper than it should have. You felt it rise in your chest. The words formed in your mind. You could have defended yourself. You could have explained. You could have fought. But instead, something inside you went still. Your jaw tightened, your throat closed, your body went quiet. And from the outside, it looked like you didn't care. But that wasn't true. You cared so much that your nervous system chose silence. Some people don't shut down because they're weak. They shut down because somewhere in their past, fighting back wasn't safe. Silence wasn't the first choice. It was the last safe one left. For many, this pattern doesn't begin in adulthood. It begins in childhood. It begins in homes where emotions were inconvenient, where explaining how you felt led to being corrected, where tears were labeled dramatic, where speaking up was called disrespect. Maybe you tried once. You said, "That hurt me." You were small when it happened, small enough to still believe that explaining would fix things. You remember standing there, heart pounding, trying to be brave enough to say, "That hurt me." You weren't yelling. You weren't accusing. You were asking to be understood. And instead of being met with care, you were met with irritation. Stop being dramatic. Why do you always make things a problem? Don't talk back. In that moment, something didn't just hurt. Something reorganized. Your body learned that truth creates danger, not physical danger, but relational danger, distance, rejection, withdrawal of love. And for a child, that feels catastrophic. So you adjusted. You made yourself smaller, quieter, easier, and no one ever saw the moment your voice went underground. And the response wasn't curiosity, it was defensiveness, or laughter, or punishment. Maybe your words were twisted. Maybe your intentions were rewritten. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive. And something subtle happened. You learned that honesty came with consequences. Children adapt quickly. If expressing anger leads to conflict, they soften it. If expressing sadness leads to dismissal, they swallow it. If expressing fear leads to ridicule, they hide it. Over time, the lesson settles into the body. Speaking up creates danger. Staying quiet creates control. This is how silence becomes survival. Not dramatic, not conscious, just practical. And that survival strategy doesn't disappear when childhood ends. It follows you into relationships, into friendships, into arguments where someone says, "Why are you so quiet?" And you don't know how to explain that you're not quiet because you don't care. You're quiet because you care too much, because your system is scanning. Is this safe? Will this be used against me? Will I regret opening my mouth? From the outside, it looks like withdrawal. From the inside, it feels like containment. In psychology, we talk about fight or flight, but there's another response that doesn't get enough attention. Freeze. Freeze happens when the body detects threat, but doesn't see a safe way to defend or escape. The energy doesn't move outward, it locks inward. Speech becomes difficult. The throat tightens, the mind races, but the mouth won't cooperate. You know exactly what you want to say. You rehearse it in your head, but the moment you try to speak, it's like something presses pause inside your chest. That isn't immaturity. That isn't indifference. It's a nervous system prioritizing safety over expression. For someone who learned early that conflict led to harm, fighting back doesn't feel empowering. It feels dangerous. So instead of escalating, they shut down. And here's what most people misunderstand. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It often means everything is happening. Inside the quiet person's mind, conversations replay for hours. They analyze tone, facial expressions, word choices. They think of the perfect response 3 days too late. They ask themselves if they were too much or not enough, if they misunderstood, if they should have handled it differently. Their emotional world is loud, but it's private, because private feels safer than exposed. And this creates a painful paradox. Silence protects you from escalation, but it also protects you from being fully known. If you don't speak, you can't be twisted, but you also can't be understood. You trade the risk of being misrepresented for the certainty of being unseen. At first, that trade feels worth it. Being invisible hurts less than being distorted. But over time, something changes. The walls that once kept you safe start to keep you alone. Conversations stay surface level. Needs go unspoken. Resentments turn inward instead of outward. And you begin carrying entire emotional experiences by yourself. Not because you prefer independence, but because asking feels impossible. This is why people who shut down can seem inconsistent. One day they're warm, engaged, open, the next distant and unreachable. It isn't manipulation, it's capacity. Being emotionally open requires energy. For someone who learned to regulate through silence, staying expressive for too long feels exhausting. After conflict or tension, their system needs retreat. Not as punishment, as recovery. But without understanding that rhythm, others misinterpret it. They see coldness where there is overload. They see distance where there is protection. And the quiet person feels even more misunderstood, which reinforces the silence. What began as survival slowly becomes identity. I'm just not good at confrontation. I'm just a quiet person. I don't like drama. But underneath those labels is often a different truth. At some point, fighting back costs too much. And here's the part that deserves compassion. Shutting down worked. It reduced conflict. It minimized emotional explosions. It prevented saying things that would later be regretted. It preserved dignity in moments where arguing would have led nowhere. It was intelligent. It was adaptive. But survival strategies aren't meant to be permanent. What protects you in one season of life can limit you in another. The body doesn't automatically update its expectations. Even when you're with someone safe, your system may still react as if it isn't. That's why healing doesn't start with forcing yourself to speak louder. It starts with safety. Safety that isn't theoretical. Safety that is experienced. Being listened to without interruption. Being asked questions without hidden agendas. Being met with curiosity instead of correction. Slowly, in small moments, the nervous system begins to relearn. Expression does not equal danger. Disagreement does not equal abandonment. Conflict does not automatically equal harm. And when that learning happens, silence changes. It stops being a reflex. It becomes a choice. You notice the difference between I'm quiet because I'm overwhelmed and I'm quiet because I'm afraid. That awareness alone is powerful because it creates space, and space creates freedom. If you've recognized yourself in this, there's something important to understand. You are not broken. You didn't fail at being assertive. You adapted to environments that didn't know how to hold your honesty. What looks like emotional distance is often the residue of emotional intelligence under pressure, a system that learned to contain because containment was safer than exposure. And maybe you're not meant to become someone who fights loudly. Maybe you're meant to become someone who feels safe enough to stay present in discomfort. There's a difference. Shutting down isn't who you are. It's what your body learned. And what was learned under pressure can be unlearned in safety. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. The goal isn't to never go quiet again. It's to know that when you do, it's because you're choosing peace, not because you're trapped in fear. And that shift is where silence stops being survival and starts becoming strength. If any part of this felt familiar, you're not alone in it. Many people carry quiet patterns that were never explained to them. They were just judged. And sometimes the first step toward change is simply having language for what your body has been doing all along. Because connection doesn't begin with fighting louder. It begins when silence is finally understood.